Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lotus Chat Worldwide. And this week we have Jazzy and Jen. Woohoo!
Hey guys.
Yes, before we kickstart our episode this week, I would like to encourage you to click like, subscribe, and follow on our YouTube Lotus Chat Worldwide and also on our Spotify. Our mission here every week is really to come and create purposeful content to empower women collectively. So this week we have episode 30, and we're going to talk about loneliness versus solitude. So maybe we'll start with Jen. What do you think is the difference between loneliness versus solitude?
Well, that is a great question because I heard both in many conversations. I really think that when it comes down to it, loneliness is something or a feeling that you get when you feel a sense of disconnect from your world. So it's that physical disconnect where you either feel, that you are basically alone in your space and you don't really feel like you can talk to someone, or you feel like there's nobody around. There is that kind of lack feeling that you have when you are in a state of loneliness. And then when it comes to solitude, I think that really is a state of kind of elevating that sense of loneliness to really going internal with yourself in those times when you are not around other people. And it allows you to be more present with yourself when you're in that state of solitude. I think there's a lot that can come from it. So in a sense, I think, one's external, one's internal. It depends on how the thoughts that the things that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves. Are we in a state of loneliness, or are we in a state of solitude at this moment? Which one is going to be able to help me get to a point where I'm comfortable with myself? Loneliness, again, I've been in that state myself, where I feel like I am disconnected from family, friends, things that I love, things that I enjoy, because I do feel a sense of lack. I feel like I'm not understood. I feel like in those times where I do get lonely, I feel like maybe there's something wrong. But when I turn that mindset into more of like, okay, I'm here. I might not, have so-and-so in my life right now anymore, or I might not have, certain people around because everybody's busy. But what if I turn that feeling into maybe a learning experience for myself, or a chance to get more in tune, to really just do my own thing, do things that maybe other people might not want to do with me, like collect something, I love going to antique shops. So why not take myself to an antique shop and bring home something cool and old, but that has that sense of history to it. So these are all things that I could do that might not necessarily be something other people might like. But again, I'm transforming that feeling of being lonely and not having a companion to actually enjoying some time with myself and with something I love. So, yeah. How about you, Jazzy? What do you think? What is the difference between the two?
I totally agree with what you're saying as far as loneliness and solitude being very similar. What I recognize the common denominator between the two would be being in the state of aloneness. Loneliness does have an energy behind the word itself, of like experiencing sadness, or the feeling like something is missing or a void. As on the other hand, we have solitude, which feels more like being complete, but yet still in the state of aloneness. In the state of acceptance of being with oneself, rather than loneliness, you feel like something's missing, or you need something outside of you. So, on the emotional scale, it kind of like weighs down a little bit more negatively than as opposed to solitude. What solitude is a lot more full and full of possibilities, when I see loneliness looking at like the limitations of things. So, I think pretty much covers it for me. What about you, Zian?
Yeah, I totally agree. What I'm hearing a lot is that loneliness is also focusing on the limitations that around us, whereas solitude is focusing on possibilities and abundance. Yeah, so
Exactly.
I'm also trying to recall an experience or a moment where we experience all that, and it's during different phases of our life. So maybe Jen, you want to share your experience first?
Sure. Well, I will share something that I think a lot of our listeners and people that are watching on YouTube can probably relate to. We all know that 2020 was a year that really affected a lot of us. And there were a lot of difficulties for many of us that came up as a result of what was going on globally. And I think one of the things that really affected many, many, many people was that sense of isolation, because we didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. We were all just trying to survive every single day.
Yeah.
And be around, or at least in some way, shape, form, be there for those that we loved. And when we couldn't be there physically, which a lot of us probably couldn't, that's where that sense of isolation grew and grew and grew. And then in my case, even though I was surrounded by family, I really missed my friends. I missed the normalcy that I had with just getting out the door and visiting with them and seeing them. And that created this sense of isolation for me, which then turned into this feeling of like loneliness, where I felt like, here I just had four walls basically. And I know a lot of us probably felt that too. I will say this, even despite everything that was going on and the feelings that I was having the last, the last couple of years, and I mean, I realized that I had to pivot that thought process and make it work. And instead of feeling like I was alone, change it to where I got more in tune with myself. And boy, if there's one thing I learned from that, was that I had a codependency on a lot of things outside of myself, to a point where I was like, my God, can I really be alone with myself? And I was thinking, wow, like that's a big question. Can we all really just be comfortable loving ourselves in the present moment and being alone with ourselves? Can we be alone with our own minds? Can we be alone with our feelings, our emotions, and work through those, even if we may not have somebody else externally to work through them? Now, I started doing a lot of journaling, really heavy journaling. I listened to a lot of music. I made time to even make calls to people that I wouldn't normally have reached out to, just to see if they were okay. Like I made that effort to connect, even if I couldn't physically connect. And that's super important, I think, because we need to figure out ways to transform that feeling of loneliness into an opportunity to be more with ourselves, to love ourselves more, and to also connect, if we can, with the others, if we have the time to do so. I mean, make time. If there's anything that we learned, is that life and time are precious. Yes. So that's my experience, guys. Yeah. I mean, it's a very real one.
Yeah, I get you. And I think for me, loneliness happens at a time when I think at a phase where everything wasn't going well. So I was afraid to be alone because I wasn't ready to accept myself, and I wasn't ready to deal with the emotions I have with myself and everything else that comes along when I am being alone. So in that sense, I felt that I was lonely because I was disconnected with the world and I wasn't ready to kind of face myself. So I totally get you. And then when you mentioned that just now, Jen, it made me rethink back this line that I have on my dream board, and I put it there that success, how I define success, is when I am happy being by myself. So that to me is solitude, and it's a very fine line of difference, but solitude is actually being really comfortable and being really happy when you are alone with your own thoughts, and being okay, acceptance, being okay with yourself, accepting yourself for who you are. I'm not saying that everything is going perfectly well, but it's just being able to accept all those emotions when you're by yourself. What do you think, Jazzy?
Absolutely. It is definitely a liberating space of independence when you can embrace your solitude. 100%. And in my journey of experiencing aloneness and my trials with loneliness, that all stemmed from when I found myself to be lone wolfing. And because I realized that the company that I was like in spaces, environments where I would like be around so many people and still feel loneliness, like that was my inner guiding system saying that I needed to reevaluate myself, how I was feeling, what are the choices, the emotions, why am I experiencing loneliness, what is really missing, all to come down to the root fact that I needed to connect with myself. I was desperate to connect with myself. I needed to know what was within my heart. What is it that truly resonates with me? Um, and I know that in my, like, especially where I grew up in Las Vegas, so a lot of the ways that I thought like were a lot different than the city. I come from a small town, so I have a very natural neurodivergence amongst my own like peers growing up. And it was only within my state of solitude that I find new places and spaces of opportunity to not only just become my best friend, but to recognize that my loneliness, that's taking ownership. That was a choice, just like how it's a personal emotional choice. So when I became mindful of and intentional about what I wanted to feel, I definitely did create the shift of embodying and embracing solitude, because I often say this, like solitude is where you meet your soul. And that's like, that's the song that you should be listening to. You know, in loneliness, you can get down with the blues and just sit there for a while, but just like anything, you have the choice to turn the dial on how you feel. So yeah.
Love that. I love that.
Jazzy, I love what you just said
Thank
about the
you.
song Soul. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. And I am also taken to this quote by good old Mr. Rogers, who I'm sure some of us might be familiar with. But he has
Yes.
a great quote where he says, discovering the truth about ourselves is a lifetime of work, but it's worth the effort. And it's not, and this is definitely this journey to become comfortable with being with yourself and alone, and you know, basically seeing that song from the inner soul. It's going to take time, but it's going to be totally worth it. So for all of our listeners out there, just take it one day at a time. And speaking of one day at a time, Zian, what are some ways that we can definitely help our listeners and the viewers here and help them empower that solitude so they can get to that point? What are some ways that they can?
That's a really good question. I think empowering solitude could definitely start with our own mind. So, you know, in taking ownership, we have to decide that we want and can be comfortable with being ourselves, and just really taking the time to spend time with ourselves. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It could really be just a walk at the park by yourself, or, you know, doing journaling or painting by yourself, but really enjoying the time that you spend with yourself. And I can share that, you know, whenever I'm alone and in solitude, I feel that I have immense clarity. And I also wanted to add that point that when we are alone, but if we are constantly connected to our phone, then the question is, are we truly spending time in solitude or just spending time alone with our phone? So yeah, what about you, Jazzy?
That's a great thing to implore, if whether or not you are actually filling your void with something that is creating more noise outside of yourself, because maybe the soul inside just wants to hear you and connect with you. And it's just so easy, right, with technology. So again, going back to being mindful and intentional about that. So the only advice I get to share about around this would be, remember that you are the cause and the effect of your reality. So be mindful about what you want to experience and how long you want to experience that. So how long is your state of loneliness going to, are you going to be suffering at the state of your loneliness? And how long or when will you decide that you shall shift into solitude? Because it's all about a matter of perspective. And so if the beauty of your life is within your eye, how are you going to choose to view things? I think powerfully create those intentions and declare what you want your life to look like. visualize the most ideal life and state of being, because that's really what it's about, is like, what state of being are you grounded in? Choose powerfully. And that's it.
Very cool.
Ladies, anything else that you'd like to share around this topic?
I think I just would like to share just one or two small things.
Love that. Let's go.
Jazzy, Zian, thank you so much for sharing those different ways that people can really pivot to get to that sense of solitude and love of self, because really it comes down with you taking time to love yourself. And let's say, you know, you may have had this narrative, this way of talking to yourself in your mind about who you are, what you lack, what you don't have. You know, if you feel like you know, really don't have anyone around you because you just feel so different, so, you know, disconnected from the world. I also encourage you guys to please just go out and seek that support that you want. I mean, yes, some of us might not feel comfortable doing it, and trust me, I completely can relate to that, but do that if you can. Like, you know, a friend, counselor, somebody, anyone out there, because it's really honestly,
Life coach,
a life coach, like everybody here. You know, I really, really want to encourage that to everybody, because there was a point in my life where I did seek out that assistance. And if it wasn't for that person telling me to change my mindset, to pivot it, I'd still be in a lot of different things that I know that I probably should not be doing now. I even, you know, relationships, for example, I probably would still be in one that, you know, I probably shouldn't be in. But again, you know, please just go out there, speak your mind, speak your truth, voice it. Don't keep it all inside. Journal it, speak it. But there you go.
yeah, create the art that you want to with that. And there's so many outlets to find what that is.
Yeah.
Channel into your soul and be unafraid to do so. I mean, if you're brave enough to sit in loneliness, be brave enough to stand for yourself, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, y'all. Well, with all of this being said, thank you all for joining us. We have our next episode, which is episode 31, The True Noise Behind Quiet Quitting. So we would love to hear from y'all. So go ahead and send us an email. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, any input, any questions, comments, any topics that we can create a discussion around. Please feel free to email lotuschatworldwide@gmail.com. Am I missing anything? I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening and watching us.
Thank you. We love you. And thank you for being here for another episode. See you next week.
Bye.
Signing off. Bye.